Hi, this is Jun. In this screencast, I'm going to cover something that we all know about but never really give any thoughts to, and that's a load path in Ruby. I decided to do this one to help beginners understand what load path is and how it works, as well as for myself, so I could use it as a note because I tend to forget a lot about it and take it for granted. Load path is being used everywhere, especially in asset pipeline in Rails. So I think having firm understanding of it, I think really helps. So what is load path? Let's start by looking at a Sinatra app that I created from another screencast, MyPasty. If you look at the F file, you'll see that I'm requiring snippet class on the lib directory. And as you can see, it has that ugly dot and slash. But if you look at Sinatra, it doesn't. You'll also see that in snippet class, UV and Mongo, either one of them have it either. They're just name. Okay, so let's dive right in and create our fun little project, and let's call it load path fun. In our project, I'll create a directory called lib and put foo class in it. And of course, every project needs a foo class, right? Okay, so let's write out of our foo class. It will have a self method named hi, and when you call it, it will have a puts hi. That's it. Real simple class. Okay, so let's start out with our old way of doing it, which is requiring that ugly dot slash lib and foo. And when we execute it, as expected, we get hi back. Okay, now let's go ahead and remove that dot and slash and just have a lib slash foo. And let me show you what happens. As you can see, it breaks. So at this point, you're wondering why it's breaking. That's because we're using Ruby 1.9.3. And starting with the Ruby 1.9, current directory is not added onto the load path, and that's the reason why it's breaking. So let's go ahead and change our load path. What we'll do is we'll add our current directory into the load path. And load path is just an array that contains a list of file paths. And it all works. Okay, another way to access load path is rather than typing it all out, you could use this abbreviation, which is basically a $ and colon, and it's identical to load path, and that's the one that I use normally. Okay, if you really don't want to mess around with load path, one alternative is that you could use require relative. That comes with Ruby 1.9, and as you can see here, with the require relative lib foo, and it will just set the reference points to your current directory. Okay, back to load path. If you don't want to have the lib in lib slash foo, but instead just do require foo, then all you have to do is add lib directory to the load path, and you could do that cool require foo. Okay, but there's one problem with this particular solution. If I move out of the directory to another directory and actually execute this Ruby script from somewhere else, then you'll see that it breaks. Okay, before I move on, let me take a quick detour and show you how we end up with cool things like a require Sinatra or require Mongo without having to do this dealing with this path issue. If you look at the Ruby gems in itself, what it does is that it looks at every gem and grabs the load path and actually handles that. So whenever you do the require, Ruby gem will take over and actually specify the path. So if you look at the source code, you'll see that there are load path management everywhere in the Ruby gems. And if you want to get a little more further details, you could actually look at the source code and you'll see that it's being handled there. Okay, now that you've seen relative path and how it works and what are the dangers, let's move on to absolute path, which is standard practice. So here I'm doing taking the load path and actually unshifting and inserting my path to it. But rather than doing a relative path, I am actually taking a file and doing expand path with a file directory name. The reason why I'm doing is that it gives me the absolute path that starts from the root. So anywhere you execute this script, the path itself stays constant. So it's not really doesn't depend on any of where the files are located, and it's specific to the machine at this point. And also I'll put the path so you could see where it is, and you'll see that the path that we inserted is all the way on the top. Okay, now let's move on to removing the lib. And at the same time, I'm actually showing you how I normally do it. This is my standard practice. Of course, you could criticize me for modifying the load path and whatever have you, but for my own personal purposes, it worked out very well for me. So, of course, you need to use good judgment when you're doing these kind of things. So first thing I do is I assign current absolute direct path to a variable. So because of Ruby 1.9 does not have a current directory as a default, I am constantly adding it. So I add that to a variable, and what I'm doing is I'm doing unshifting the load path, starting with my current directory, and then adding any subsequent subdirectories after that. And as you know, this is array, so I'm just doing that, and so I no longer require specifying of a subdirectory for any of my internal libraries. And of course, there are some at times I will need to include some other separate libraries, and that I do not add to the load path, just so that I know when I do requires whatever directory is slash, then I know it's some kind of a external libraries or something that's separate. That's the reference that I use. And with that, when I run it, everything works well. And that wraps up this screencast, which is going back to fundamentals on load path. So until next time, you could follow me on Twitter at rubyhead. You could visit my blog at blog.rubyhead.com. And also, with any questions, requests, or even comments, you could hit me at email at june@juneworld.com.